Hello and welcome to the Capitol Report on Entity Television. I'm Steve Lance. Special Counsel John Durham testifying on the Hill today over his report on what went wrong in the FBI's investigation into former President Trump's 2016 presidential campaign. Entity's Melina Wisecup followed this hearing closely today, hearing from both Republicans and Democrats. Melina, aside from the expected Republican concern that the FBI targeted Trump without adequate evidence, what other concerns were raised and what did Democrats have to say?
Well, one concern that Chairman Jim Jordan repeatedly brought up through today's hearing was the question of why the FBI did not investigate Charles Dolan, who was one of the key sources for the Steele dossier. I wanted to find out what Democrats have to say in response to this concern of Jordan's. Here's what they told us. And on Dolan, why do you think the FBI chose not to interview him about the Steele dossier?
I think that there's a lot of evidence here in terms of what was already done. Almost 3 dozen crimes, people that pled guilty to things, corporations.
Everyone they prosecuted was convicted. Durham after $6.5 million, prosecuted 2 people and took the jury 2 hours and 6 hours respectively to acquit them. He has no credibility whatsoever.
And to that point of those cases pursued by Durham ultimately being acquitted, this is one of the ways that Democrats repeatedly tried to discredit Durham's report. That report that was released back in May ultimately says that the FBI skipped key procedures and they had insufficient evidence to launch that full investigation into former President Trump's 2016 campaign, although Durham did say that a preliminary investigation was needed.
Our report should not be read to suggest in any way that Russian election interference was not a significant threat. It was.
The FBI opened up Crossfire Hurricane without speaking to the people who provided the initial information. Is that true?
That's correct. We found troubling violations of law and policy in the conduct of highly consequential investigations.
So if there was legitimate violations of law and policy, why were those cases brought forth by Durham ultimately acquitted? We asked some Republicans why they thought that those key players were not held liable or accountable. Here's what they told us.
You're talking about trying to bring in witnesses from foreign countries to prove cases.
You can do something wrong that isn't illegal. You can do something wrong that is not easily indictable or easily convictable.
And although Durham's report and today's hearing was only focused on Trump's 2016 campaign investigation, Chairman Jim Jordan says that these consequences could reach even further than just political candidates.
Parents at school board meetings are terrorists. Pro-life Catholics are extremists. Even journalists aren't safe.
Although we know the DOJ repeatedly has denied this, saying that their work focuses solely on violence and threats of violence. As for what Congress is planning to do with this Durham report, they're planning to update the FISA regulations, which ultimately deals with how foreign intelligence is gathered. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
Articles of impeachment against President Biden and FBI Director Christopher Wray from 2 different members of Congress. The House has to vote on both resolutions within the next 2 days. Here are the details.
Impeaching Joseph R. Biden, Jr., President of the United States, for high crimes and misdemeanors.
Congresswoman Lauren Boebert of Colorado on Tuesday introduced articles of impeachment against President Biden. The resolution alleges abuse of power, stating that President Biden has intentionally facilitated a complete and total invasion at the southern border. It specifies that Biden ended migrant protection protocols, closed detention facilities, and more. The White House reportedly responded, saying that extreme House Republicans are staging baseless political stunts that do nothing to help real people and only serve to get themselves attention. Boebert is forcing the House to vote by using a privileged motion. This means the House has to vote on it within 2 days. However, Democrats already said they'd try to pass a motion which would block Boebert's effort. Meanwhile, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene on Wednesday also said she'll use a privileged motion. That's to impeach FBI Director Christopher Wray. She says Wray disrespected our Oversight Committee and our Chairman Comer by forcing us to see redacted versions of unclassified 1023 forms that gave proof of then VP Joe Biden taking a $5 million bribe. Also on Wednesday, House Republicans moved ahead with their plan to censure California Democrat Adam Schiff. Democrats tried to pass a motion to block the vote. On Wednesday, their motion failed 208 to 218. Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna of Florida introduced the resolution to censure.
As chair of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff launched an all-out political campaign built on baseless distortions against a sitting U.S. president at the expense of every single citizen in this country and the honor of the House of Representatives.
Republicans are accusing Schiff of pushing the Trump-Russia collusion narrative in 2016, knowing it wasn't true. The House postponed the vote to censure, but is expected to vote on it soon.
President Biden calling China's Xi Jinping a dictator. That comes barely a day after the U.S. and China held high-level talks. NTD's Iris Tao brings us more from the White House.
And President Biden has called Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping a dictator, adding that he got very upset and embarrassed because a Chinese spy balloon was shot down in the U.S. earlier this year. And Biden made those comments during a fundraising event on Tuesday night, while adding that Xi got upset because he didn't know that his own government spy balloon ended up here. Meanwhile, China hit back on Wednesday, calling Biden's comments open political provocations. And the latest crossfire here comes right after Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with Xi Jinping in Beijing in an attempt to ease tensions.
Establishing open communications channels, directly raising issues of concern.
But actually, it's not the first time that President Biden has some harsh comments on Xi Jinping. While campaigning for the White House in 2020, Biden called Xi a thug. And in 2021, Biden said that Xi
doesn't have a Democratic with a small d bone in his body.
And while some say that Biden's latest comments here added uncertainty to his own administration's efforts to try to ease tensions, Mao Zhu, a former China advisor to the State Department, said that Biden's calling Xi a dictator actually helped Secretary Blinken's entreaties to Beijing by adding some teeth and strength to America's positions. And all this comes as President Biden is set to meet with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the White House on Thursday. The two leaders are expected to announce agreements on technology and defense cooperation. And a U.S. official told Reuters that Washington wants India to be a strategic counterweight to Beijing. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao, NTD News.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.